Florentino Pérez spent the first half of this year saying no to Rodri. Now he's saying yes. The Real Madrid president blocked this move for months. Then Spain won the World Cup, Rodri picked up the golden ball, and everything changed. So let's get into how Perez went from shutting the door on Rodri to reportedly pushing to get him into the building. Here's where things stand right now. For most of this year, Florentino Pérez wanted nothing to do with Rodri. That's not speculation from angry fans on social media. That's coming straight from the people who cover Real Madrid for a living. Fabrizio Romano has claimed that Los Blancos president Florentino Pérez is not keen on the Man City and Spain international defensive midfielder, with the situation completely cold. Cold, that's the word Romano used. Not unlikely, not complicated, cold. And then Rodri went out and won the World Cup. Rodri played a key role as Spain defeated Argentina 1-0 to claim the 2026 FIFA World Cup in New York. He didn't just play a role, he walked away with the tournament's top individual prize. He was awarded the Golden Ball as the tournament's best player over Lionel Messi, joining an elite group of World Cup legends that notably excludes Cristiano Ronaldo. Now here's the part that makes this whole story move. Within days, we're talking days, not weeks, the noise out of Madrid flipped completely. A report out of Madrid on the Tuesday after the final said the club had made its call. According to reports, Real Madrid have changed their mind on a world superstar and will now proceed to try and make a move. The same outlet didn't hold back on how big a deal this actually is, saying it's hard to overstate how much of a difference this signing would make, and calling it a case of Perez finally waking up. That's one voice, but it's not just one voice. Journalist Matteo Mordo, who covers the club closely, said the same thing. From a different angle, he reported that Perez is now showing himself much more open to the possibility of signing him, referring to Rodri, though he was careful to note Madrid would only pay a fair price for him. So you've got Perez going from a hard no to what sounds like a genuine reconsideration, all triggered by one tournament. That's the U-turn, that's the headline. Now let's back up and understand exactly how firm that no was. In the first place, because it wasn't a soft no. It was about as hard a no as you can give in football. Go back a few months and the reporting was blunt. Romano didn't hedge on this one, he said flatly. Florentino Pérez is personally blocking Rodri's move to Real Madrid. He is shutting the door. Rodri genuinely dreams of joining, but Perez does not want him. Read that again, personally blocking, shutting the door. That's not a club being lukewarm on a target. That's the president of Real Madrid actively standing in the way of one of the best midfielders alive, a guy who wanted to come. Other outlets covering the Bernabeu backed this up independently. One report described the link between Rodri and Real Madrid as being cold at the moment because of the president, quoting Romano again, saying the story between the two sides had frozen over specifically due to Perez. And it wasn't just talk. Spanish radio and outlets like Cadena SER were reporting the same resistance. From inside the building, Rodri was very keen on signing for Real Madrid, and while it would have been a fairly affordable move, given his contract situation, Perez was reluctant, according to Cadena SER and other Spanish outlets. So why? Why would a club president say no to a reigning Ballon d'Or winner, who was actively asking to come play for him? Part of it was timing and risk. Before the tournament, Rodri was not considered a realistic target. His age, injury record, and contractual situation meant Madrid had looked elsewhere. When assessing potential midfield reinforcements, Perez had built his summer plan around other pieces. He wasn't going to blow that up for a 30-year-old, coming back from a serious knee injury, no matter how good he used to be. Part of it, according to some reporting, was also about the club's broader project. One outlet described Perez as remaining intent on building a championship-caliber squad centered around Kylian Mbappé, which meant a defensive midfielder wasn't exactly top of the shopping list, even a great one. But here's the thing that makes this story so interesting. Perez was pretty much the only one in the building who felt that way. And that internal split is what set up everything that happened next. While Perez was busy closing doors, other people inside Real Madrid were doing the opposite. This wasn't a case of one unified club saying no to a player. It was one man holding the line while almost everyone around him leaned the other way. Start with the fans. This wasn't some quiet fringe opinion. It was loud and it was consistent for months. Real Madrid was under pressure from fans urging Perez to recruit Rodri, with the player described as very eager to return to Spain and sign for the club. That's a fanbase actively campaigning for a signing their own president didn't want. Then there's the boardroom itself. This is where it gets interesting, because the disagreement wasn't just Perez versus the supporters in the stands. It was Perez versus people who sit in meetings with him. Mordo reported that a portion of the board was pressing to reach an agreement with the Spanish midfielder after becoming infatuated with him during the World Cup. Think about that phrase for a second, infatuated. That's not mild interest, that's executives inside one of the biggest clubs on the planet watching a 30-year-old dominate a World Cup final and deciding they had to have him, regardless of what their own president had already decided months earlier. And it wasn't just background noise. Some of this pressure came from people connected to the club's own leadership race. Presidential candidate Enrique Riquelme had publicly supported a Rodri signing ahead of Real Madrid's June elections. So you had a rival for the presidency using this exact transfer as a talking point to win votes. That's how big this disagreement got. It spilled into club politics. Put all of that together and you get what one report bluntly called a civil war brewing behind the scenes at the Bernabeu over one player. Morto's own reporting captured the tension directly, describing the club as internally reconsidering the situation, with part of the board pushing to reach an agreement after Rodri's great World Cup, given the midfielder was completely open to returning to Spain, which had always been his priority. There was also a financial argument being made by the pro-Rodri camp inside the club. This wasn't going to be some outrageous world record fee. Reports pegged the number at a level that made it hard to justify, saying no purely on cost. Real Madrid was reportedly open to signing Rodri after Perez reversed his earlier stance, with the deal estimated at around 50 million euros, though it hadn't yet reached the negotiation table with Manchester City. That's cheap by Bernabeu standards. This is a club that's paid far more for far less proven players. So the argument from the board wasn't just emotional, it was a straightforward value case. Get one of the best midfielders in the world, a guy actively trying to force his way to you, for a fee that barely registers on Madrid's usual spending. There's also the coaching angle, and this one matters more than people give it credit for. Jose Mourinho, who took over at Real Madrid, was reportedly not just open to a Rodri deal, but actively behind it. One report described Mourinho as personally targeting the midfielder as part of his rebuild of the squad. Radio Marca's Sergio Valentin reported it in blunt terms, saying Mourinho was interested in a deal for Rodri, and that Real Madrid had agreed and informed Mourinho that they would attempt to sign him after the World Cup. So now you've got the fans, a chunk of the board, and the actual head coach all pulling in the same direction towards signing Rodri, while Perez alone stood as the final obstacle. That's a lot of pressure stacked against one man's decision. And Perez himself reportedly had his own private reasoning for eventually warming up, separate from the outside pressure. Sources close to the situation suggested he saw something specific in Rodri's game that the club had been missing for years. One report put it this way: Perez believed that Rodri possessed the qualities of a midfielder that Madrid had lacked since Toni Kroos and Luka Modric. That's a big statement. Kroos and Modric ran Madrid's midfield for the better part of a decade, won everything there was to win, and left a hole nobody had properly filled since. If Perez genuinely saw Rodri as the answer to that specific problem, it starts to explain why the resistance eventually cracked. It wasn't just about the World Cup performance, it was about a gap the club has been trying to solve for years. So by the time the World Cup rolled around, Perez was already sitting on a mountain of internal pressure. The fans wanted it, part of the board wanted it, the manager wanted it. All that was missing was the final trigger to tip Perez over the edge. And Rodri was about to hand it to him on the biggest stage in football. Now let's talk about the player at the center of all this, because this isn't just a story about a club changing its mind. It's about a guy who has been chasing this move for a long time on his own terms. Rodri's connection to Spanish football runs deep, and it doesn't start at Real Madrid. It starts at their biggest rival. Rodri had been keen on joining Real Madrid for several months, having previously played for Atletico Madrid before moving to the Premier League. He came through Atletico's academy before making the jump to Manchester City, where he spent years turning into arguably the best holding midfielder on the planet. That Atletico background actually makes this whole situation more layered. He's not some outsider dreaming about Madrid from afar. He grew up in the city, just on the other side of the rivalry. One report put his own priorities plainly, saying he was completely open to returning to Spain, which had always been his priority. And Rodri hasn't exactly been quiet about it either. Back in the spring, before any of this World Cup drama kicked off, he'd already hinted at where his head was at. He was quoted admitting that you cannot turn down the best clubs in the world, a comment that immediately got tied to Madrid's speculation given the timing. Then during the tournament itself, with a title on the line, he addressed his City contract directly, choosing his words carefully but leaving the door open. Speaking to AS, he said his focus was on the World Cup, but acknowledged his situation with his club was something to think about once the dust settled. Multiple journalists have independently used almost identical language to describe Rodri's mental state on this. The word dream keeps coming up. Romano used it, Bolavip used it, Team Talk used it. When you get that kind of overlap across separate outlets with separate sources, it tells you this isn't rumor for the sake of clicks. This is something Rodri has made clear to people around the game. One outlet laid out just how far that dream goes back, tracing it to his childhood in the city. Rodri dreams of playing for Real Madrid. He would love to join one day, and from the player's side, that opportunity remains a dream. He came through the youth system at Atletico Madrid, so returning to Madrid. Returning to Spain and playing for Real Madrid is something he would love. That's about as direct as it gets without the player literally requesting a transfer in public. And it explains why, even while Perez was slamming doors shut for months, Rodri never walked away from the idea. He kept the door open on his end the entire time, waiting for Madrid's side to catch up. There's also a human wrinkle to all of this that's worth mentioning, because it shows Rodri wasn't just thinking about a club. He was thinking about fitting into a specific dressing room, one that includes players he's had public friction with before. After his Ballon d'Or win, there was real tension with Real Madrid's camp. Most notably Vinicius Jr., who many felt should have won that award instead. Rodri handled that tension by going out of his way to smooth things over, at one point saying he had immense respect for Vinicius and Real Madrid, and that there was no need to dwell on any of it. That respect apparently went both ways more recently. One report noted that Madrid's own players would love to sign Rodri, especially after Rodri admitted that he respects Vinicius Jr., and that the Brazilian international was the deserving winner, helping to mend that fence before he'd even signed anything. That matters more than it might seem. A move like this doesn't just need a president to say yes. It needs a dressing room willing to accept the guy walking in. And Rodri, whether by instinct or design, had already spent months quietly clearing that path before Perez ever budged. So here's where things sat heading into the back half of this saga. A player who's wanted this for years, a club president who spent months saying no, a coach and a chunk of the board saying yes, and a dressing room that had already made peace with the idea. All that was left was Manchester City, and City had zero interest in making this easy. Here's the part of this story people keep skipping past. Rodri doesn't just get to walk out of Manchester City because Perez changed his mind. City have their own plan, and it does not involve losing their best midfielder for a discount. Start with the contract situation, because this is the whole ballgame. Rodri's deal at the Etihad runs until 2027, and that one detail shapes everything else in this negotiation. His contract with the club runs until the summer of 2027. That gives City real leverage. They don't have to sell this summer if they don't want to. And City have made it clear they're not just going to let this play out passively. They've already put pen to paper on an offer trying to lock him down long-term. City have already tabled a new contract offer for the Ballon d'Or winner, continuing negotiations that have rumbled on for months, as Rodri weighs up his next move with his existing deal entering its final year. New manager Enzo Maresca has made his stance obvious too. He wants Rodri full stop. One report described the situation in stark terms, saying Maresca would be desperate to keep hold of him by tying him down to a new contract, given Rodri has entered the final year of his deal at the Mancunian club. This isn't just about wanting a good player to stay. Rodri is, by multiple accounts, close to irreplaceable in the way City actually functions. One in-depth report on the club's summer described him as the single most consequential outstanding question of the window, with his influence on how City play, press, and transition, making him irreplaceable in any realistic sense within the system Maresca is expected to implement. That's why City haven't just sat back and waited to see what Madrid does. They've been actively building insurance around the situation, just in case. The same report tied Rodri's contract uncertainty directly to other moves in the market, noting City's pursuit of midfielders like Tonali and Anderson reflects squad management logic as much as ambition. Insurance that becomes essential if his future stops being guaranteed. There's also a stubborn financial angle to all of this, and it's one Madrid can't just wish away. City reportedly aren't interested in letting one of their most important players go on the cheap, even with just a year left on his deal. Reports suggested City would rather risk losing him for nothing down the line than sell him for less than his value right now. This decision was probably informed by Man City's reported stance that they would not let Rodri go cheaply this summer, despite his expiring contract. They would rather keep him and lose him for nothing in 2027 than sell him in 2026. That's a serious statement of intent. City would genuinely prefer walking away with £0 in a year's time than take what they consider an undervalued fee now. It tells you exactly how hard any Madrid approach is going to have to fight, no matter how open Perez has become. And City aren't approaching this from a position of weakness. They've got a manager who genuinely rates Rodri as central to his whole project, not just a name he inherited. Reports around Maresca's plans described his midfield rebuild as being shaped directly by whatever happens with Rodri's decision, with other transfer business paused until there's clarity. So while all the noise from Madrid's side has been about boardroom pressure and presidential U-turns, City's side of this has been quietly stubborn the entire time. Offer on the table, no urgency to sell, and a manager who wants this specific player more than almost anyone else at the club. That collision between a desperate City refusing to be rushed and a Madrid board finally aligned behind their president is exactly where the story stands right now. So here's where all of this sits. Perez has gone from personally vetoing this deal to reportedly being open to it, all inside a matter of weeks. And the trigger for that shift is about as clean as it gets in football: a World Cup title and an individual award. That made saying no look increasingly difficult to defend internally. But wanting something and getting it are two very different things. And this is where the story gets genuinely uncertain. Even with Perez's mind reportedly changed, nothing about this deal has actually happened. As reported by Morto and also Romano, Perez has yet to change his official stance on signing the midfielder, meaning at present Rodri is not an option for Real Madrid. That report and the ones describing his reversal both exist in the same window of time, which tells you this is moving fast, and it's moving in real time as you're watching this. One financial breakdown of the situation captured just how fragile the whole thing still is, pointing out that the most important detail right now isn't Perez's change of heart at all. It's that the absence of formal negotiations is the most important detail here, and Manchester City hasn't been called yet, meaning City's negotiating position remains strong. Rodri may want it, Perez may have warmed to it, but nobody's actually picked up the phone to Manchester City with a real offer. And until that happens, this is still just two clubs circling each other while a player waits in the middle. There's also a squad puzzle Madrid still has to solve before any of this becomes real. Bringing in another defensive midfielder means somebody currently in that Bernabeu dressing room probably has to make way. And that's not a simple conversation. One report laid out exactly how messy that could get, noting if Real Madrid were to decide to go for Rodri, it could mean a midfielder would have to be sold, opening up another set of complications, since players like Tchouaméni have extended their contracts, and Camavinga doesn't want to leave, while Valverde isn't for sale. So even in the best-case scenario for Madrid fans, this isn't as simple as Perez writing a check. There's a domino effect waiting in that dressing room that nobody inside the club has fully worked out yet, and City's side hasn't softened at all. Their preference, based on everything coming out of the Etihad, is still to either extend Rodri or let his deal run down, rather than sell him at a discount this summer. That stance alone could keep this frozen for months, regardless of how loud the noise gets from Madrid's boardroom. What's genuinely remarkable about this whole saga is how publicly it's played out. A club president's private transfer calculus laid bare in real time, shifting because of 90 minutes in a World Cup final and one individual trophy. Executives who were infatuated after watching him lift that trophy. A coach who reportedly sees him as the closest thing to a Cruz or Modric replacement Madrid has had in years. A fan base that spent months publicly campaigning for their own president to change course. And a player who's been dreaming about this exact move since before most of this reporting even started, quietly repairing relationships in that dressing room in case the day ever came. Whether it actually gets over the line depends on things that are still completely unresolved. A fee City are comfortable with, a squad Madrid can actually reshuffle, and a formal approach that, as of the most recent reporting, still hasn't been made. But the headline of this whole thing is no longer in question. The man who spent months personally shutting the door on Rodri is now, by every credible account coming out of Spain, the one trying to pry it back open. Manchester City mainstay offered to Real Madrid for €70 million as Florentino Pérez faces growing internal pressure. Yahoo Sports. Florentino Pérez reportedly shutting down Rodri's Real Madrid transfer after 2026 World Cup win. Bolivip US. Real Madrid's potential Rodri transfer highlights how sports megadeals are reshaping club finance strategies. Cryptobriefing.com. Florentino Pérez standing in the way of Real Madrid signing 2026 FIFA World Cup winning Spain international. Reports Sportskita Fabrizio Romano confirmed what Real Madrid fans didn't want to hear about Rodri. The Real Champs Rodri transfer from Manchester City to Real Madrid transfer feed. Florentino Pérez currently reluctant about Real Madrid signing Rodri, managing Madrid. Transfer market: Florentino Pérez would slow down the Rodri case at Real Madrid, Benin Web TV. Rodri keen on Real Madrid move, but Florentino Pérez blocks transfer. Soft football. Rodri's Real Madrid move stalls as President Perez blocks transfer. Gistrial. Real Madrid: Rodri wants to sign for Jose Mourinho's side and leave Man City. Team talk. Real Madrid: Rodri snubs mega offer and sparks Los Blancos civil war. Football transfers. Rodri wants to join Real Madrid, but negotiations are personally blocked by Perez. Telecomasia. Real Madrid: Romano reveals Los Blancos' decision on signing Rodri from Man City after Perez call. Football 365. Real Madrid reconsider signing Manchester City's Rodri after FIFA World Cup victory. Yahoo Sports. Why Real Madrid suddenly seem to want Rodri after previously rejecting him. Round table. Real Madrid finally set to make move for World Cup superstar. Round table. Cristiano Ronaldo: Vinicius Jr. deserved Ballon d'Or over Rodri. ESPN. Manchester City's Rodri explains why he deserved the Ballon d'Or over Real Madrid's Vinicius. World Soccer Talk. Rodri fires back after Ronaldo's claim that Vinicius deserved the Ballon d'Or. Bolivip US. Man City stance on Rodri contract after WC negotiations pause. City Extra. Man City awaiting Rodri contract clarity to progress Enzo Maresca's midfield rebuild. Yahoo Sports. Update on the future of this Manchester City midfielder. What should Maresca do? Yardbarker https://www.yardbarker.com/soccer/articles/update on the future of this Manchester City midfielder. What should Maresca do? /S1 17736 44,087